Welcome to China Truths. Today we will bring you an in-depth analysis about the threat of Beijing interference in British Columbia election. Now, let's dive into the details. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Threat of Beijing interference casts shadow over British Columbia election. With British Columbians heading to the polls in a few weeks, security experts and Chinese diaspora groups are sounding a warning about potential interference by China, given its previous attempts to meddle in federal and municipal elections in the province. Michelle Junokatsuya, former chief of the Asia-Pacific Unit at the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, (CSIS), said in an interview, BC is the landing point of so many activities from the CCP in collaboration with triads, in collaboration with tycoons as well. There have been extensive reports about Beijing's interference in politics at all levels in British Columbia, Canada. The only MPs whose targeting by China in the last two federal elections has been documented by the Foreign Interference Commission, with the exception of former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, are BC MPs. A former member of British Columbia Legislative Assembly or MLA revealed in 2019 that while he was in office, he was detained for 8 hours during a trip to China, saying he believed it was because of his human rights activities. Last year, the province's premier demanded a CSIS briefing over reports of China's interference in the 2022 municipal elections. The Beijing-fueled opioid crisis and related money laundering operations in the province were the subject of a recent multi-year-long inquiry. In his explosive remarks in 2010 to Canadian Broadcasting Corporation or CBC that became a topic of national discussion, then head of CSIS Richard Fadden singled out BC for having municipal politicians who are under the influence of a foreign government. He had mentioned that China is the most active among foreign powers when it comes to meddling in Canada's affairs. Mabel Tung, chair of the Vancouver Society in Support of Democratic Movement, told the Epoch Times that with the election coming, politicians should really open their eyes. Evidence presented at the Foreign Interference Commission and intelligence leaks in the media show that Beijing's interference can take several different forms when it comes to elections. One form could be for China to favor a certain party over another if it deems it more favorable to its interests, or even attempting to bring about a certain overall election outcome. The Foreign Interference Commission's May 3 interim report documents how the Conservative Party and its then-leader Erin O'Toole were targeted by a campaign of disinformation by widely circulated Chinese-language articles and social media posts during the 2021 election campaign. In that campaign, O'Toole was strongly outspoken against Beijing's aggressions and rights abuses, and his platform had an extensive section on how to counter China. The report also cites a February 17, 2023, article by the Globe and Mail based on intelligence documents saying that although Chinese diplomats weren't happy that the Liberal government had recently become critical of China, they still preferred the Liberals over the Conservatives. The report says China's aim was for a minority Liberal government, as a majority government could mean easy adoption of policies deemed unfavorable to Beijing. Another form that China's election interference could take is supporting the campaign of certain candidates. Intelligence reports documented in the Commission's report say international students were bussed into the 2019 Liberal nomination contest of Toronto's Don Valley North in support of then-candidate Han Dong. The report says the students were provided false documents by a proxy of China and voted for Dong's nomination under threat by the Chinese consulate. Dong went on to win the nomination, become MP in the Liberal stronghold riding in 2019, and get re-elected in 2021. He resigned from the Liberal caucus in 2023 to sit as an independent amid media reporting about his interactions with the Chinese consulate. Dong, who hasn't responded to the Epoch Times requests for comment, has denied any wrongdoing and has launched legal action against Global News for its reporting about him. Yet another form the interference can take is Beijing's targeting of candidates whose positions are injurious to the Chinese government. The Commission's report says, foreign interference by the PRC, or People's Republic of China, is generally thought to be party agnostic. The PRC does not support any particular party, but rather supports outcomes that it views as pro-PRC, regardless of the political affiliation of a particular candidate. The report details how Vancouver East NDP MP Jenny Kwan, who has been outspoken about China's human rights abuses, was targeted in the 2019 and 2021 elections by Beijing. This included being shut out of events in the Chinese community, and people exhibiting fear to vote for her out of concern for the safety of their families in China. The report also documents the extensive targeting of former Conservative MP Kenny Chiu, representing BC's Steveston-Richmond East riding, during the 2021 election. Chiu wanted to bring in a foreign agent registry legislation, and was critical of China's human rights infractions. The interference included false reports portraying him as being anti-Chinese and misrepresenting his proposed legislation. Chiu ultimately lost the 2021 election to the liberal contender. The February 17, 2023, Globe article says classified reports show that China's then Consul General in Vancouver, Tong Xiaoling, boasted about helping defeat 2 conservative MPs in the 2021 election. Another form of interference could come from staffers and campaign volunteers. A September 8, 2021, intelligence document presented at the Foreign Interference Commission says that political staffers are a target for China because they are the ones who control the schedules of the politicians and can act as gatekeepers for their employers. The size document says, these staff are thereby placed in positions where they can clandestinely and deceptively control and influence the activities of elected and appointed officials in ways that support PRC or CCP interests. In the United States in early September, an aide to New York Governor Kathy Hochul was arrested for allegedly acting as an agent of China. She is accused of blocking requests for meetings with representatives of the Taiwanese government and Chinese persecuted groups, smuggling a Chinese consulate official into a remotely held government conference call, and obtaining proclamations for a Chinese consulate official, among others. Rights activist Tong says Beijing's tactics include targeting high-profile election candidates and arranging for its cronies to surround the candidate and become his volunteers and political staffers. She said, they try to create relationships with them and help them. If that high-profile candidate gets elected, they may even become a cabinet minister, and then they'll be under the influence of China. She says in the BC election, it's important for politicians to pay attention to whom they hire as aides and volunteers, and also not to shy away from criticizing China's aggressions due to fear of upsetting Beijing. As well, she says, they need to be clear that China uses the racism label to stifle criticism of its aggressions. Human rights and democracy, there are Canadian values. We should be standing by our values in whatever decision we're making, and any policies we're making, she said. In an interview with the Epoch Times, former MP Chiu said that when it comes to election interference, there are 2 key points to keep in mind. The first point, he says, is that Beijing targets those who hold power, regardless of their party affiliation. The CCP is not liberal or conservative, or socialist or capitalist, they are attracted to power, and so they would be willing to approach from that perspective, he said. The second point Chiu stresses is that Beijing is ethno-agnostic. They don't care if you're Chinese, Korean, Japanese, white, Anglo-Saxon, French, Quebecois. They would approach, and they would at least analyze your accessibility according to the information they have on hand on you, he said. If the target can be a useful idiot, they will use them. For voters to be able to discern which politician may be under the influence of Beijing, Chiu says, it's important to observe what they say and the stances they take. All these, in a sense, are a litmus test for many of our citizens and friends and neighbors who are seeking public office, and I think it's important for them to let us know where they stand on issues like that. Last March, BC Premier David Eby said he was very troubled by news reports that China had interfered in the 2022 Vancouver municipal election. His comments came in reaction to a March 16, 2023, article by the Globe and Mail citing intelligence records that the Chinese consulate used diaspora community groups and groomed certain candidates for the election. The intelligence reportedly said China wanted the incumbent Kennedy Stewart to lose. Stewart, who lost that election to Ken Sim, had been outspoken in support of Taiwan's independence and condemnation of China's human rights violations. Sim, who did not return requests for comment, has pushed back against any questioning of the legitimacy of the election, saying if he was a Caucasian male, we're not having this conversation. The Globe article also said China's consul general had discussed supporting a candidate for consul, with hopes of the candidate later moving on to provincial and federal politics. The May 3 Commission report talks about how foreign powers cultivate deep, long-lasting relationships with their targets, and how they target politicians at even lower levels of government, since a school board trustee today could move on to become an MP in the future. Brad West, mayor of Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, said last year that he was informed by SIs that China tried to recruit a candidate to run against him in the 2022 municipal election in his city. SIs had previously told West that he was very much on the radar of the government of China for fighting against its funding of the Union of BC Municipalities. West, who has been very critical of China's rights abuses and interference in Canada, had said the scheme was effectively a cash-for-access arrangement for Chinese officials to mingle with municipal politicians. In the aftermath of these news reports, Eby said while the federal government has most of the tools to combat foreign interference, he wants to know if there are other ways that his province could close the gap. He also pushed for Ottawa to enable Tsai's information sharing with the province regarding foreign interference threats. This request was met with changes brought in by Bill C-70, an act respecting countering foreign interference, which passed into law earlier this year. EB said on March 17, 2023 that we're always looking for ways to make sure our elections are free and fair. The Epoch Times asked the BC NDP and EB, who are now campaigning ahead of the October 19 provincial election, if they have any additional comments on the issue of Beijing's interference, but didn't hear back by publication time. John Rustad, leader of the Conservative Party of BC, told the Epoch Times in June that people in the Chinese community should be able to feel safe, they should have to be able to raise their families, they should be able to integrate into their communities in the way they want to, they should receive the services they need. Rustad received a Tsai's briefing in early July, according to the Breaker.News. Rustad told the publication that the agency spoke to him for about an hour, but he didn't disclose the topic of discussion. He added that he's quite concerned about foreign influence in elections, in particular in British Columbia, and not just from China. Former Tsai's manager Juno Katsuya says one of the features of democracy is that candidates need to face re-election every few years, and this can be exploited by hostile governments like that of China. He said, candidates who want to be elected will seek that support in various communities. And where you've got money, where you've got concentration of certain ethnic groups, where you've got people with equal chances to win a position, you're going to have a lot of people attempting to simply compromise and go and sign a deal with the devil, and that's what's currently happening in BC. Activist Tong says politicians should be very vigilant about the circles they associate with and events they attend, especially those organized by the Chinese consulate and groups associated with China's United Front Work Department. According to research cited by Public Safety Canada, the United Front organization is China's primary foreign interference tool. Some BC politicians frequently attend events featuring the Chinese consulate and those organized by groups holding pro-Beijing positions. Some others, even if they don't attend regularly, raise eyebrows by attending such events due to the positions they hold. Human rights and Hong Kong pro-democracy groups were greatly concerned when then Defense Minister Harjit Sujjan attended a September 22, 2019, event in Vancouver celebrating the founding of People's Republic of China. His office later said he was attending in his capacity as a candidate in the upcoming election, not as a minister of the Crown. Similar concerns were raised about the attendance of then Minister of Small Business Mary Ng at a similar event in Toronto. More recently, several BC MLAs were seen in a video standing alongside the Chinese Consul General to the playing of China's national anthem at a March 5, 2023, event marking International Women's Day in Vancouver. Among them was Teresa Watt, who left the BC United Caucus in July to join the BC Conservatives. Watt, a former cabinet minister in the BC Liberal government of Christy Clark, has attended many events with Chinese consulate officials. Last year, a The Breaker.News article said that while EB had expressed concern about municipal elections interference attempts, a member of the NDP government's Chinese-Canadian Community Advisory Committee offered a certain interpretation of EB's comments in a post on Chinese social media. The March 2023 post said EB is standing up to request that Tsai's provide proof of those allegations. The writer has penned a number of commentaries dismissing investigative news articles about politicians' ties with Chinese officials as being a political witch hunt, according to screenshots included in the TheBreaker.News article. Brian Lee Crowley, founder of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, says recent revelations at the Foreign Interference Commission and other recently revealed intelligence show that foreign powers are targeting Canada to disrupt its democracy and make Canadians lose faith in their institutions. We should be extremely concerned about that. Not just in British Columbia, although I think British Columbia is a province whose politics have been quite deeply infected by this, he said in an interview. Canadians have to be vigilant, and they have to be demanding about the connections that exist between their politicians and people who might, wittingly or unwittingly, be the instruments of foreign governments. Tong says over the past few decades, the diaspora communities have been witnessing extensive interference and subversion efforts by Beijing, and what has been covered in the media and the commission hearings are just the tip of the iceberg. The CCP is infiltrating Canada using the United Front Work Department, she says. It's been a long time that things have been happening, but nobody really pays attention, and so it's been normalized. Tsai's told the Epoch Times that it has observed foreign interference activities at all levels of government across Canada and across party lines, adding that it takes all allegations of such activities very seriously. SAIS is committed to equipping elected officials to identify foreign interference threats and take measures to address and counter foreign interference, including by providing briefings, SAIS spokesperson John Townsend said in an email. Townsend also pointed out that SAIS is part of BC's recently formed Elections Integrity Working Group, EIWG. Established by Elections B.C. earlier this year, the group, the first of its kind at the provincial level in Canada, consists of representatives from provincial government, federal and provincial agencies, SAIS, the Canadian Centre for Cyber Security, and the RCMP or Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We work closely with partner agencies to mitigate the risk of foreign interference in BC elections, Elections BC spokesperson Wesley McInnes said in an email. The EIWG meets on an ongoing basis to assess risks, facilitate collaboration between members, and support the development of risk response strategies for individual agencies. McInnes said while BC elections remain safe and secure, the working group was formed to mitigate any risks in recognition that the risk environment around elections has changed in recent years. In response to a request for comment, Public Safety Canada said it's not an investigative agency, and deferred the request to the police of the jurisdiction. The RCMP's E-Division, which has jurisdiction in BC, pointed to the EIWG, which the police force is a part of. A spokesperson with the BC provincial government said that during elections, government communications are limited to public health and safety, and they can't comment on other issues.